The Bone Archives by Jreymermaid. What I'm about to tell you is true. I know every narrator says that, but this isn't just a story for me. It's something I lived through. The events I'm about to describe happened years ago, when I was working in the library archives. I still don't know if I'll ever be the same. I'm telling it now in the hopes that speaking it aloud, putting the memory into words, might help me cope with the weight I've carried since. Chapter 1: The Bone Collection. Back then, I was working nights as a library assistant while teaching part-time as an adjunct professor in anthropology, specializing in forensic anthropology. The library's basement archive wasn't really an archive at all. It was a dumping ground. Uncatalogued donations, water-damaged theses, books no one ever bothered to process, in dust so thick it clung to your skin. None of it was accessible for research. None of it had been touched for years. With my supervisor's blessing, I decided to tackle the chaos during the slow hours of my closing shifts. I imagined uncovering lost treasures, rare books, forgotten research, hidden history. I've always loved archival work. The hours slip away when I'm sorting, repairing, or just sitting with the mystery of old objects. The night I started, the library was nearly empty. I unlocked the archive door and froze for a moment. The room was wall-to-wall boxes stacked unevenly to the ceiling. Dust motes swam in the fluorescent light. None of the boxes had labels. I realized too late that I should have scoped out the place before agreeing to this project. Well, too late now, I muttered. I picked a box at random. Junk, more junk, a cracked microscope, a stack of outdated journals. I began 3 piles: trash, possible resources, and unsure. The first night was fruitless, but I told myself there had to be something worthwhile buried in here. On the second night, the far half of the room was plunged into darkness. The lights there had given out. I worked anyway, my shadow looming across the boxes. That's when I found them. Under a stack of broken lab equipment, 8 boxes of plastic human bone casts, perfectly articulated skeletons. It was an incredible find. These casts were expensive and in great condition. I cleaned them, labeled them, and added them to the library's in-house study collection. Students loved them. For weeks, the bone boxes were constantly checked out. I felt like I had already justified the entire project. I had no idea that those boxes were the beginning of something much darker. Chapter 2: Bone Boxes. A few weeks later, I decided to check the bone boxes to make sure all pieces were intact. Most were fine. Just a few stray sternums and scapulae to return to their proper sets. Then, in the last box, I found it. An extra bone. It was a clavicle. Real bone, not plastic. From an adult male, by the size and shape. Bleached. Smooth to the touch. We did not under any circumstances, circulate real human remains in the library. They're fragile and require secure storage in a departmental bone room. I was the only staff member trained to tell the difference between plastic and real bone. So whoever slipped it into the box had either done it deliberately or without understanding what it was. The bone's presence made no sense. The boxes never left the library. No faculty had requested real remains. The only explanation was that someone brought it in and hid it there. Or that it had been in the archives all along, waiting for me to find it. I removed it from circulation immediately and emailed my colleagues. No one knew anything about it. When I checked the system, that particular box had been used by over 15 students just that day. There was no way to tell when or by whom the bone had been added. I told the student assistants to start counting the bones before closing each night. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the start of something. Chapter 3. Gaslit. The next afternoon, I had replies waiting in my inbox. Nothing. No staff member or biology faculty had touched the bone boxes. The biology department's inventory was intact. I put the matter on the library meeting agenda under the title, Human Remains Found in Basement. When I explained the situation, Sylvia, the media supervisor, frowned. Why does this even matter? Isn't it a waste of time? I stared at her. Finding human remains without documentation is a legal and ethical problem. If we can't identify the source, we have to notify the police. Sylvia scoffed. How do you even know it's real? I reminded her again that I teach forensic anthropology, that I could tell without question that it was real bone. The meeting ended with no resolution. I left feeling dismissed, gaslit, as if I were overreacting. That night I went back to the basement. The lighting had gotten worse. The single working row of fluorescents flickered and buzzed, leaving the far corners in shadow. I joked to myself as I stepped inside. Hello, creepy basement. Never change. I opened a few boxes. Junk, more junk. Then something caught my eye. A stack of microfiche, with the labels almost entirely worn away. Just the faint number 9 on one strip. And then I saw it. In the far back corner, half hidden behind a leaning pile of boxes, was an older box, heavier, damp along the bottom, the cardboard soft to the touch. A thick layer of dust coated the lid. When I opened it, a fine, gritty powder clung to the tape. I leaned closer. It wasn't dust, it was bone dust. Tiny, jagged fragments were scattered inside. Under my flashlight, I could see the telltale honeycomb shape of trabecular bone. Some pieces were so small, they could have passed for sand. I dumped the contents onto the floor, my breath shallow. Mostly broken slides, metal scraps, and then my fingers closed around something larger. A bone fragment, smooth in some places, porous in others. A metatarsal, maybe, fractured into pieces. The air in the basement felt heavy, close. My neck prickled as though someone was standing behind me. But I was alone. Chapter 4. In Circulation. When I came back to work after the weekend, I went straight to the bone boxes. I'd only been gone a few days, but there were 3 more bones inside. 1 true rib, a sacrum, a scapula. All of them prepared the same way, bleached, cleaned, display ready, like they belonged to a research collection. But the sizes varied. One was juvenile, the others adult. My stomach turned. This wasn't coincidence anymore. Someone knew I'd found that first clavicle, and they were sending me more, piece by piece. Either that, or someone was offloading their research collection in the strangest, most unsettling way possible. I put the bones in my desk drawer with the others. I'd investigate further before going to the police. I needed to clear my head, so I headed back down to the archives. My project had been neglected for weeks. I told myself a few hours of organizing old books would calm me down. The lights were worse than ever, a dull, erratic flicker that left the far corners in shadow. Fuck, I muttered. Of course. I didn't feel like trekking upstairs for a proper flashlight, so I made do with the one on my phone. I worked for a couple of hours, sorting ruined books into piles. Most were worthless, mold-eaten, warped, or brittle enough to crumble in my hands. Then I saw it. The dust on the floor had been disturbed. Not just disturbed, there was a footprint, too large to be mine. Only the dean and I had keys to this room. A chill rippled through me. The footprint led toward the far corner. I forced myself to follow, careful not to smudge the edges. A stack of boxes sat there, the top ones coated in thick dust, but the layer on the side facing me had been brushed away. I pulled on gloves. The top box was full of damaged books. Silverfish darted between the pages, their translucent bodies catching the light. Ugh, fuck, that's disgusting. I shoved the box aside and reached for the one underneath. The moment I lifted the lid, I gasped. What the f... I sank down hard onto the floor. The box was full of human remains. Bones of different sizes, different people, all carefully cleaned and prepared. And suddenly, I knew. I'd found where the bones in circulation were coming from. Chapter 5. The Bone Collector. I took a deep breath, steadied my shaking hands, and dug deeper into the box. At least 4 skulls, fully intact, which meant at least 4 separate individuals had been disarticulated and packed in here. I knew the law. Undocumented human remains are illegal to possess. I needed to contact the police immediately. At the university, everything had to be cataloged, provenanced, and stored in a secured bone closet, or at least stored in a locked room. The fresh footprints told me someone had moved this box recently, and they had to be the same person slipping bones into the student collection, feeding them to me, one piece at a time. As I pushed the box back, something caught my eye. A faint groove in the floor. A hatch. That didn't make sense. The basement archive was the lowest level of the library. Why would there be a hatch here? I hooked my fingers under the ridge and lifted. It came up easier than expected. Heavy, but not stuck, as if it had been opened not long ago. A rusted set of steps led down into blackness. I pointed my phone flashlight into the space, expecting a crawl space, but it was bigger. Much bigger. Cobwebs draped across the opening like curtains. The air was damp, tinged with the sour scent of old dust and metal. I climbed down slowly, each step creaking under my weight. When my feet touched the floor, I stopped breathing. Rows of shelves stretched into the darkness. Each shelf was labeled with dates, and each held human remains, carefully laid out, cleaned, tagged. The dates spanned nearly 70 years. Adults and children. Skulls, femurs, vertebrae, all arranged with clinical precision. A hidden bone archive. This wasn't an official collection. If it were, it wouldn't be buried under the library, invisible to the institution. Whoever did this knew exactly how to prepare and preserve bone, and wanted no one to find it. Unless they wanted me to find it. The dust toward the back of the room was disturbed. Something was there. A cracked, peeling Gladstone bag, its brass clasp partly open. I crouched. The bag's leather was damp and cold under my fingers. Inside, old medical tools, their steel mottled with age. And on top of them, a folded scrap of paper. The ink was still wet. It smeared as I unfolded it. It read, "At last, welcome to the Bone Archives."